West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Claire, the question is this. What do you think your old colleagues on the Democratic side of the U.S. Senate are thinking and saying tonight?
It's not a good night, and I think we can try to dress it up. We can try to take it out, but it's not a good night. And here's what I'm most afraid of. I am begging my friends in the United States Senate, I'm begging all the Democrats on Capitol Hill, do not spend days or minutes even trying to blame someone for what happened tonight. You know, whose fault was it? Why weren't the bills signed? You know, did Joe Biden could have done more? It's time to pivot and punch. They got a deal today on reducing prescription drug prices in this country that will be huge. They are on the precipice of passing legislation. Forget about the top number. Look at what it's going to do for women in this country, especially women with children that need child care, that want universal pre-K. And I think we have an opportunity to turn this around for next fall, but not if we spend the next 3 weeks or month trying to figure out who to blame.
But Claire, to your point, Congressman Ryan of Ohio, during 2 minutes today on the House floor, did a better and more passionate job, sometimes at a shout volume, of telling people what's in the bills that will improve their lives, laying out the stakes for not just Democrats, but for all Americans. He did a better job at that than anyone in congressional leadership and certainly anyone at the White House. Why is that, do you think?
I think part of the problem is there has been such a focus on, very narrow margins. I mean, we have a bare majority. So we've got to get everybody going the same way. And that is a hard job for Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the White House. They've been so focused on making that happen, they have forgotten that most Americans don't even know what's in the bill. They don't know. They know something about climate change is in there. I think they're beginning to figure out universal pre-K is in there. Child care, expansion of health care, hearing assistance for Medicare. They need to start talking about what's in it and quit talking about who agrees with them and doesn't agree with them in the Democratic Party.
All right, Lawrence O'Donnell, your reaction to this evening thus far as we look at the board in the studio. A quick note to our viewers. Our characterization of the New Jersey race has changed, as it had to, from too early to call to too close to call. So in that case, we're covering two barn burners side by side here. Lawrence, over to you.
Well, Brad, there's always a risk of overinterpretation of governors' races and what they might mean for Washington. I mean, when you look at Virginia, it's such a peculiar situation there. It's a one-term state. They really only want their governors to serve one term. And so you're asking Virginia voters to kind of defy their own habits by restoring a former governor to become governor again, which they've only done once before. They did it with a Democratic candidate who ran in 1965, I think it was, yeah. And then in 1973, he ran again and won as a Republican. And so what Terry McAuliffe was trying to do tonight has never been done. And so there was 4 years of a McAuliffe governorship that was on the line, that was being evaluated by voters. And there was, Youngkin doesn't have a record. He has that advantage of not having a record. And so it's a very peculiar race to try to bring into the calculus of what does it mean in Washington. That won't stop people from doing it. They'll be doing it in the House. They'll be doing it in the Senate. There are members of the House who have never served in the minority before in the House of Representatives. They will be hearing things about what it is to serve in the minority. There'll be people who are trying to worry them about what they need to do in terms of this legislative negotiating that's going on now and the ground they need to give in order to get this bill across the finish line as fast as possible. There will be a new urgency in that. It will be a fear-based urgency that wasn't there last week.
Juanita Tolliver, I think everyone can agree that McAuliffe made some unforced errors, big ones, in this campaign at a terrible time. They are seldom made at a good time. If he indeed ends up going down to defeat tonight, and I want to pick up on Claire's point, maybe go against Claire's advice, do any Democrats not named McAuliffe share any of the blame for what may happen in Virginia?
Brian, I actually agree with Claire on this one. It is not worth Democrats' time to play the blame game, but instead they should be pressing the reset button, resetting on how they respond to these horrible racist dog whistles from the GOP and the lies from the GOP, resetting on how they sell their policies to voters and make sure that voters fully understand that they're fighting tooth and nail for them, as well as resetting on the types of candidates that they run. Right? Like, I feel like voters have been explicitly clear about the need to see candidates who are more representative of this country, as well as candidates that they know will fight tooth and nail for them, to deliver for them. That is what Democrats need to focus their energy on in the coming weeks, especially as they gear up for 2022, because I assure you that the sweater vest, very nice soccer dad model that Youngkin has put out there, this new, I'm a palatable version who still says similar things that Trump said, especially when we saw his closing argument about what he dubbed education, when in reality it was about race and whiteness. When he put that out there, people responded to it. And Democrats have to come up with a substantive rebuttal that is going to not only resonate and counteract the energy that the GOP is going to receive from these types of arguments, but also create enthusiasm among Democratic voters, because it's not enough now to just say that Trump is toxic and this candidate is just like Trump, especially when they carry themselves explicitly different from Trump.
Great point to go to A.B. Stoddard, who is terrifically connected among especially elected Republicans in Washington as journalists go. And A.B., what is the lesson here, or is it too early to write it down, about Republicans wanting to run a successful campaign, perhaps even in 2022, this looming presence of Donald Trump, who I note has claimed credit tonight, as everyone anticipated he would, even though we have not called this race. He's claiming credit for a Republican victory in Virginia.
Well, Donald Trump does not like being shunned off stage, and he was in this race. It was clear that Glenn Youngkin did not want to have him around in the final days, didn't want to appear with him, didn't want to answer questions about him. And so the former president is trying to make sure that everyone is looking at his new statements, taking credit for turning out the MAGA base and calling Glenn Youngkin an America First, patriotic Republican and cut from the cloth, of his base and really trying to cling to Glenn Youngkin when Glenn Youngkin was trying to detach himself in the general election of this campaign, not the primary, from Donald Trump. So he's a little bit sore, wants some more attention, and really interesting numbers, both in New Jersey and in Virginia tonight, Brian, in areas where both Republican candidates are doing way better than Donald Trump did in those two states. So that's obviously going to make him sore. I think there's too much early celebration among Republicans that Glenn Youngkin is the new mold, the post-Trump candidate, and a way for the party to pivot. It's going to be very different next year for congressional and federal candidates in the House and Senate to separate away from the former president, who will loom very large in the 22 campaigns with his endorsed candidates, and again, his need for attention. And it's not going to be the same kind of thing with a one-off governor's race where he's not really part of the show. It will be harder for people to talk about whether or not they support Kevin McCarthy for Speaker. What do they think of the big lie? That's just going to be a separate kind of question entirely. But for Democrats tonight, they do need to think. They need to get into the data of this race, and in Virginia particularly. And they need to be concerned about Biden's poll numbers. They need to be concerned about the fact that very many Virginians who voted for Joe Biden ended up voting for Glenn Youngkin tonight. They need to find out why.
It is Wednesday, the 3rd of November of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes. Oh, just a velvety hollandaise sauce over a lovely egg dish. Oh, my. Yeah. Well, how are ya? Yes, there is fleece-vested fascism in Virginia. No Santa Claus. Not for us. Boy, talk about a lump of coal. Though, as we are speaking, and well, since I put myself in a bubble a bit ago, New Jersey, the governor race there is locked in a tight battle. And we can keep our fingers crossed that Murphy will prevail. I saw the hey, we're going to go to bed because it's getting really late here on the East Coast speeches by the New Jersey candidates. And Ciccarelli, is that his name? Is that how you pronounce it? Anyway, he promised 300 pies. And everybody in the auditorium was supposed to go over to Luigi's, I think, because they got 350 pies. Is that like a chicken in every pot? Because I want to know, is he buying votes? No, he is rewarding his staff, and the people, the loyal followers, came to cheer him on. But it made me want to go to Luigi's to have a pie. Convinced me. Well, let's hope Murphy prevails, because we need more Democratic governors, because we already saw what the Republican ones will do. Yeah, I guess. America as we know it is not how we know it anymore. Or did we ever? I don't know. Struggle is ongoing. Seems to have never stopped. Oh, boy. I sometimes wonder about the anti-slavery people back in the day. Did they think they were going to be able to end slavery? And, oh, yay, Emancipation Proclamation. Everything's great now. And then you had the midnight ride of the KKK. You want reconstruction? We'll give you reconstruction. Go reconstruct your face somehow. Or worse. And it was usually worse. And boy, does it feel like that again. How do I know how it felt? Well, I read. I can tell how people felt because it was visceral. We have similar KKK midnight rides now, no, don't we? In fact, I guess you could call Rittenhouse part of that midnight ride. Apparently, they're going to put him up on the stand. Okay. I guess they think if they do, people will look at him. Oh, he's such a cherub-looking little boy. He was in such danger from those commies. Oh. Shot a guy in the back. And they're arguing self-defense. All right. He was such a young man. He was afraid for his life. Well, he didn't have to cross the 15 miles. That's another thing. He only crossed 15 miles to cross state lines. Well, what are you? Are you against borders now? The same people who can't stand caravans of refugees coming across the border, and their argument is, you don't want borders. The same ones are now saying about Rittenhouse, come on, he just crossed 15 miles to get across the border, and he didn't take a gun with him. He got it there. It was illegal for him to possess a gun in Illinois, and it was illegal for him to possess a gun in Wisconsin. He crossed state lines, procured a gun, and killed people with it, and somehow he's the victim. Oh, he was just doing his job. He was just going to work. He's underage. No one asked him to, well, let's put it this way. The owner and anybody who had anything to do with the car dealership didn't ask him to guard it. They didn't ask anybody to guard their dealership. The Proud Boys and the militia decided on their own. This is where we're going to stand, and if any black people come by here, or any commies come by here, they're going to be sorry. So you have pretty much a peaceful protest, except for the agent provocateurs, because we also have evidence of a Proud Boy who was affiliated with the cops going to that auto parts store, the Umbrella Man, kicking in the thing and starting the thing on fire. And other protesters are trying to say, hey, man, what are you doing? Because they were out there protesting police violence, not by creating violence. But what do the cops do? They always escalate, and they have their proxies if they can't do it themselves. But in this case, I don't know if it was so much a proxy. I think this guy was actually a cop and a Proud Boy. So you have the agent provocateurs out there fomenting violence, and then you have your protectors protecting people from the violence. And then they go and crack heads and kill people who are protesting the violence. Because the people perpetuating the violence are afraid. I had to kill him. I was afraid. Crossed state lines. Procured a gun illegally. And is now claiming stand my ground. When if you see the video, the kid was out there instigating everything. People thought he was an active shooter. They're going to take him down. How is it any different than somebody coming into Walmart saying, I'm going to take care of things? Just watch. Good guy with a gun. Try to protect yourself from someone who's an active shooter. Gets shot in the back. So much for a good guy with a gun. And then a good guy with a skateboard. And this is the other thing I don't understand. I read an article where they referenced this fellow with the skateboard as being a sex offender. How does that have anything to do with the fact that he was killed trying to protect the crowd from this kid who had an AR-15? And how did anybody know that he was a sex offender when he came upon the kid with and tried to protect the crowd with a skateboard? Just saying. The media has a nice way of putting things, don't they? And that judge, boy, I don't know. How come he hasn't been censored? Oh, that's right. The people who would censure him agree with him. Star Chamber this. Wow. Okay, well, we got the midterms coming up. And Claire McCaskill at the top pretty much laid down the gauntlet. It's time to pivot and punch. And I keep saying that's exactly right. If you don't punch the Nazi, this is what happens. fleece-vested fascism. Terry just could not secure the Karen vote in Virginia. White women broke from Terry. Well, actually, the breakdown is white educated women went for Terry. Or when I say educated, college educated, I'm sorry. And non-college educated white women broke for the fleece-vested fascist. Because they like that. Okay. I don't know. Maybe that's why they don't want anything taught in the schools. Except the Turner Diaries. And the fire and brimstone part of the Bible. Sharing and loving your neighbor. Forget that. Commie. Loving your neighbor. What are you, a commie? Yeah, well, Jesus was a commie. I even wrote a song about it back in the day. Enough of that. Why don't we get into the curated part of the show, because we have quite a bit to go through. Oh, maybe, actually, you know what, before I get started on that, let me just mention real quick about Mom's progress. When we were going to the ER for her blood pressure issues and other issues, in the midst of that, she was also getting prepped for a hip replacement surgery because it's pretty well degenerated. Her spine is twisting on its axis. It's not like a snake. It's actually twisting on its axis. And that doesn't feel good. So in the midst of that, then we both get COVID, and the attention is put upon making sure she doesn't die of COVID. And then she got septic too. So the back issues and hip issues were put on, the back burner, so to speak. So as she's recuperating here at home and getting her strength back, she has to do exercises and get up about, get her heart moving, get her heart beating, and get the juices flowing. So we walk her around a bit in the house. We're not quite ready to go outside and walk around the perimeter of the property. Not quite there yet. But as I'm helping her back to her room and her bed, she starts getting unsteady. Now, I'm behind her, and I'm carrying a bunch of stuff, too, because I don't want her to carry anything while she's walking back. And she has a cane. So she starts getting all wobbly, and I realize that she somehow let go of her cane, and she starts to topple. So I drop what I have and try to catch her, and pretty much all I can do. And I got to say, my mom is kind of like one of those white dwarfs that have a lot of mass. They don't seem very big, but boy, they got a lot of mass. Dense. So she's not an easy one to pick up because there's a bit of mass there packed in that tight body. And she started to topple, and I went to grab her, but the momentum was such she was kind of moving away from me. So I was able to sort of break her fall, but she sat down, plopped down on her butt, which isn't nice, and then banged the small of her back against a cabinet or something there. It could have been the little space heater. Not bad, but she's old, and her head kind of went back and smacked against the little dresser there. Not hard, but she's old. Fortunately, we have care nurses coming through, and she was supposed to get a bath yesterday, a shower. So the two care nurses came, one the actual nurse, and then the care nurse later, who was going to help her with the cleaning parts. Both of them are registered nurses. So they checked her out and did all her vitals. Her eye pupils were reactive in the proper way, so she didn't have a concussion or anything. But she is on Eliquis, which is a blood thinner, and so the fear is that she could have some internal bleeding. But everything checked out, and it turns out that Mom's nerves in her back are, because of the spine twisting on its axis and her hip, she's not able to feel certain things. So her legs would get kind of shaky, and she'd not feel her legs. So that is a bit of a concern. Though I will say today, she seems to be better and talked about that she's walking better. And so that's good. But it was a bit of a concern last night. I was thinking maybe I got to start wheeling my mom around in the wheelchair. And that's wouldn't be good necessarily for her psyche, because the idea is to get back outside and putz around in the garden and stuff. Even though we do have a forecast of snow this weekend. Yes, you heard that right. Where did fall go? Went right to winter. Oh, how nice. Okay, so that's a little update on Mom. She's doing better. I was a bit concerned yesterday. We were ready to take her back to the hospital, though I don't know. That's where you get sick. So we try to avoid that now. But she seems to be doing a bit better today, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that that will be the case. Just hope she doesn't overdo it, because that's what we all do now, don't we? We start feeling better, and then we overdo it, and then we wonder, what the hell did we just do? We overdid it. Okay, what's on the menu here? In the curated part of the show here in the salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, starting off in the Bistro Cafe, federal prosecutors expect foreign interference in the criminal cases related to Trump inauguration chairman Tom Barrack. A Trump-loving QAnon follower only got probation for shooting up the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon during the Black Lives Matter protests. Remember when everybody was saying, our cities are on fire and those stupid commie Antifa in Portland, Oregon are attacking the courthouse. And it was QAnon, Trump-loving, Proud Boy, Boogaloo Boy militias shooting up the courthouse and starting the dumpster fires in front of the courthouse. Let's make that clear. And the Republican defense of the Texas abortion law at the Supreme Court argued that women are too stupid to have rights. And Alito agrees. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Czech centrist and center-right parties reached an agreement on forming a majority coalition government. And CIA Director William Burns is on a rare visit to Moscow to discuss U.S.-Russia relations. Sounds like a honeypot to me. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And yes, we need funds. Boy, I keep telling you that everything keeps going up. I just got to notice that at the end of the year, the plan that we have on Spreaker for our podcasts will more than double. They're discontinuing our plan and pretty much forcing us into a plan to give us not even quite the services that we had. Almost. But then it's going to be more than double what we pay now. So I guess we'll look back at Libsyn and see how they fare. Boy, that's just one example of how everything keeps going up, and why I make these, or we make these entreaties for funds, because it costs, and nothing is for free. Damn. Oh, well, that's the way it is. That's the way of the world. And one thing that we do that allows us to be able to fly under the radar and continue this resistance against the hostile takeover of the United States of America is that we pay our bills, no matter what. So if you could help us by sending us how about what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send those funds our way once a month, it really helps in our ability to pay our bills and continue our civic duty as the founders originally intended. So thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted on Twitter and other social media platforms. You know who they are. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Bob Brigham out of Raw Story. Federal prosecutors may fear foreign interference in criminal cases related to Trump inauguration chairman Tom Barrack. Barrack was charged in July with illegal foreign lobbying for the United Arab Emirates in an effort to influence Trump's foreign policy. Remember the sword dance that they all did? Whoa, I wonder what that was about. Barrack was charged in a 7-count indictment with acting as an agent of the UAE between April of 2016 and April of 2018. He was also charged with obstruction of justice and making false statements to federal law enforcement agents. According to the indictment, Barrack and 2 other men charged yesterday, Tuesday, Matthew Grimes of Aspen, Colorado, and Sultan Rashid Al-Malik Al-Shahi, a UAE national, capitalized on Barrack's status as a senior outside advisor to the Trump campaign to advance the interests of and provide intelligence to the UAE, while simultaneously failing to notify the Attorney General that their actions were taken at the direction of senior UAE officials. Following his arrest, Grimes sought the court's permission to remain free on bail but not wear an ankle tracking bracelet. And yesterday, Tuesday, the New York Daily News said that the surfer bro had lost his bid to have the monitor removed. He regularly surfs and attends fitness classes. He cannot immerse the device in water, and obviously the ankle bracelet is a subject of notice, comment, and embarrassment in his daily activities, his attorney wrote, with the accent provided by moi. But U.S. Attorney, or Assistant U.S. Attorney Ryan Harris argued that there was, quote, a risk of flight in this case, end quote. He directly interacted with extremely wealthy and powerful foreign powers, Harris noted, adding that the potential pressures from foreign powers is significant. The judge asked if there was intelligence that a foreign power may intervene. I don't think I can say in a public setting, wink, wink. I don't think it would be appropriate, wink, wink, Harris replied. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Tess Risky from the Willamette Week. A federal judge sentenced 40-year-old Cody Melby to 5 years of probation for firing a gun at the facade of the Mark O. Hatfield Federal Courthouse in downtown Portland on January 8th. The reason he fired the weapon? He wanted to get in front of the court for political and patriotic reasons, said Melby's attorney, public defender Brian Francesconi. He is an intensely patriotic person, the attorney said. As Willamette Week reported in January, federal prosecutors alleged Melby fired several rounds from a 9mm handgun into the courthouse's exterior on the evening of January 8th. 2 days prior, on January 6th, police cited Melby for criminal trespass while in possession of a firearm after he allegedly sought entry into the Oregon State Capitol in Salem during a far-right rally and refused to leave after police in Salem asked him to do so. Last month, Melby pleaded guilty to one count of possession of a firearm in a federal facility for the January 8 incident, as federal prosecutor Paul Maloney said that, or noted, a felony conviction typically carries a prison sentence. However, given his lack of criminal history, Maloney said, and the totality of the facts and circumstances of this case, we believe that a sentence of probation is warranted. Oh, you mean you like the guy? Federal prosecutors and Melby's attorney asked U.S. District Judge Karen Immigert to instead sentence Melby to 8 months of community confinement, which would be credited with time served for Melby's stay in pretrial custody and 5 years of federal probation. During sentencing, the judge told the attorney she had concerns about what I perceived to be the leniency of this sentence, but both the prosecution and the defense rationalized Melby's actions, explaining that the Army veteran fired at the federal courthouse because he was influenced by the 2020 election, wildfires, and the political landscape of Portland, and felt an urgency to express those views to a federal judge. Probation. During this time, he became fixated on the civil discourse surrounding the 2020 protests, as well as the presidential election, the prosecutor said at sentencing. Gosh, with a prosecution like that, who needs a defense attorney? As the court notes, there were publicly posted YouTube videos of the defendant advocating for violence in support of his views. Mr. Melby was determined to get himself in front of a federal judge to express those views. He determined that he needed to fire a weapon at the structure of the Hatfield courthouse. He did not aim inside the building, the prosecutor continued. He aimed at a part of the building that was unable to hold people. He aimed at one of the columns that was wrapped in plywood. Effectively, Judge, this defendant used a firearm to commit an act of misdemeanor vandalism, instead of a federal felony of, attacking a federal courthouse with a gun. Now, we must understand that there were scores of Antifa, which turns out to be pretty much housewives, moms, and dads with leaf blowers, protesting the violence of the police. Black Lives Matter. Those people who were not injured permanently by projectiles fired by the police on them, and in some cases, even if they were injured, of course, a lot of them are still in jail. For what? Obstructing the sidewalk. And this guy gets probation for firing on a federal courthouse with a 9mm gun to talk to a judge, and all we hear is about how Antifa and Black Lives Matter protesters caused all the violence, destruction, and our cities being on fire. Leading up to January 6, when rioters attempted an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, Melby had posted videos onto his YouTube channel that included statements that subscribe to the alt-right ideology of Stop the Steal and QAnon conspiracy theories, federal prosecutors wrote in their initial complaint against Melby. For example, in a YouTube posted on January 5th, federal prosecutors said that Melby called on former President Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act and claimed that Portland city officials had allowed Antifa to grow into a terrorist organization. In the video, Melby also called for the arrest of elected officials, including Oregon Governor Kate Brown and Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. And the prosecution argued he only needs probation. Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Amanda Marcotte out of Ceylon. On Monday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments over SB 8, a new Texas law that set up a bounty hunter system that empowers private citizens to use lawsuits to prevent abortions. Going in, most observers expected the Republican-dominated court to be eager to uphold this law. In a twist, however, multiple conservative justices, including Donald Trump appointees Kavanaugh and Barrett, seemed skeptical. To be sure, it's not because the conservative justices care about human rights, but because they care about their own power and look askance at a law designed to evade legal review by federal courts. Now, the expectation in legal circles is that the court will throw out the Texas law and open the door to banning abortion through a Mississippi case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Org, which is a straightforward challenge to Roe v. Wade. Most of Monday's arguments were centered around impenetrable legalese about ex parte Young and sovereign immunity. But through the thicket of lawyerly jargon about who has what legal power, a picture did emerge of the actual moral and political argument that Republicans are making about abortion rights. It all boils down to one very basic insulting premise. Women are simply too stupid to be allowed rights. Throughout arguments, Solicitor General of Texas Judge Stone and Justice Alito, both Federalist Society far-right Republicans, casually spoke about women as if they were incapable of handling the choice to have an abortion. When asked about who could suffer extreme moral or otherwise psychological harm over someone else's abortion, for instance, Stone invoked the tragic tale of a mansplainer who is horribly abused by a woman who decides to ignore his opinion. An individual discovers that a close friend of theirs who they'd spoken with about pro-life issues and about abortion has instead chosen to have a late-term abortion in violation of SB 8. And they were very invested in that child's upbringing and the child's coming into being. Can you imagine the nerve of this hypothetical woman? After someone goes to all the effort to browbeat her about how much he hates abortion, she up and decides that she's going to abort a pregnancy anyway. One can feel Stone's heart breaking for the mansplainer, denied his God-given right to boss women around. And if that diatribe were not sexist enough, Stone had to slide in that little jab about late-term abortion. It's been a common talking point for GOP defenders to claim that the law gives women plenty of time to get abortions. The implication is that only dum-dums can't get it done on time, and therefore they deserve forced childbirth. But this supposed 6 weeks to decide is utter nonsense. While the media keeps calling the Texas law a 6-week ban, it is at best a 2-week ban, as that's the length of time since the missed period indicating pregnancy. And Alito, on the other hand, decided to insult women's intelligence from another angle. portraying women as mental children who are being manipulated by sinister abortion doctors and therefore need to be protected from having choices. Alito repeatedly invoked the specter of a bird-brained woman who didn't realize until after the fact that the abortion, the one she scheduled, went through and paid for, meant she wasn't going to have a baby. He spoke of a woman who wants to sue the doctor who performed my abortion because it caused me physical or emotional harm. Conjured up a woman who sues an out-of-state doctor for the physical or emotional harm suffered as a result of the abortion. And Alito asked of a woman who sues a doctor who has flown in from another state to perform the abortion. As Justice Sonia Sotomayor gently pointed out, there are already common law torts that cover emotional infliction of harm, breach of contract, and medical malpractice. So if a woman was actually forced or tricked into an abortion she didn't want, she can already sue for damages. Alito, however, wasn't interested in the real world. He wanted to wallow in an elaborate sexist fantasy where women routinely get abortions without understanding such a procedure means they won't get to have the baby. Wouldn't the mansplaining hero in Stone's tragic tale have told them? Alito was riffing on a sexist notion that has been rampant in the anti-choice world for decades. Women are naturally too dumb to make choices, the argument goes, and therefore end up awash in regret after foolishly letting the abortion industry take their babies away. This myth persists, despite ample evidence that the opposite is true, and that a whopping 99% of patients report 5 years after the fact that their abortion was the right choice. In fact, most women who get abortions are already mothers, so they understand intimately what the other choice already looks like. And you can read the rest of Amanda Marcotte's article through the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos, so go to the show notes and links. Well, let's get to our break since we've been burning up time. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, abbreviated possibly, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day that became known as the Greensboro Massacre. Members of the Ku Klux Klan and the American Nazi Party shot and killed 5 participants in a demonstration held by the Workers' Viewpoint Organization, later called the Communist Workers' Party. Workers' Viewpoint organizers had come to Greensboro in an effort to strengthen the unions at the Cone Mills textile plants. At the time, Cone Mills was the largest producer of denim in the world. African-American mill workers faced discrimination and dangerous conditions, including breathing in textile dust that was known to potentially cause brown lung disease. Tensions between the communist organizers and the Ku Klux Klan began to mount. Disagreements also arose between the communists and other union organizing efforts in Greensboro. The Workers' Viewpoint group decided to hold a Smash the Klan demonstration. They coordinated the route of the march with the local police. But on that fateful day, no police were there to provide protection. In broad daylight, cars filled with Klansmen and Nazi members drove up and opened fire on the demonstrators. 5 people fell dead. A criminal trial was held in 1980, and a federal civil rights trial took place in 1984. Both times, the defendants were acquitted by all-white juries. In 2004, Greensboro began a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address their community history. The second chapter of the final report recounts how Milano Cottle, the Nazi who owned one of the vehicles driven that day, later bragged in an interview that the Klan destroyed the damn Union with its actions against the marchers. After the tragedy, there was a strong backlash in the press against the communist organizers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high bumping 70, and cloudy this morning with showers during the afternoon. Looks like it wants to bring about a half an inch between this afternoon and overnight, where we'll have lows tonight around 51, a steady rain with showers continuing overnight. Winds out of the southwest, or out of the south at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And as I mentioned, that rain between this afternoon and tonight will bring in half an inch. And then cloudy with a light rain early tomorrow with highs around 55. Winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Looks like it will bring something less than a quarter inch of rain. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue to rise, now standing at 236,018 confirmed cases of infection. And our deceased have raised another 4 to 324. Ragweed pollen is rated as low outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good at 17 parts per million. That's damn good. And the daytime UV index is low at level 1. Get any lower than that and you won't have any. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.11 inches. Visibility is down to 1 mile. I forgot to mention it's pretty foggy outside right now. And relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 53 and partly cloudy. Rome is 63 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 52 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 50 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 73 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 61 and also partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and partly cloudy. But New York is 47 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Czech centrist and center-right parties reached an agreement on forming a majority coalition government, and its key agenda, the chairman of the strongest party in the new coalition, said yesterday, Tuesday. The five-party coalition faces elevated inflation, mounting debt, an economy curbed by a global shortage of semiconductors and surging energy prices, and a resurgent COVID-19 pandemic, which has been gathering pace in recent weeks. Petr Fiala, Civic Democrats chairman and prospective prime minister, said the parties have agreed on distribution of government posts among them, although he did not name the individual candidates. We have gone through a long whole day, but also successful negotiation, Fiala said at a televised briefing after talks which lasted more than 12 hours. We reached an agreement on our coalition treaty. We have also agreed on our coalition agenda, he said. The parties, grouped in two coalitions, won 108 seats in the 200-seat lower chamber of parliament, beating current Prime Minister Andrej Babis, whose key allies were ousted from the parliament. One of the main tasks for the forming coalition is the state of public finances, hit by the pandemic and measures meant to tame it, as well as generous spending by the outgoing government, which raised pensions and state employees' wages, while it pushed through large tax cuts. The Finance Ministry, which sees this year's fiscal gap at 7.7% of GDP, has proposed a 2022 central budget with a deficit of $17.09 billion U.S., deeper than the final result in 2020 when the pandemic hit. The incoming coalition has said that it wanted to change the budget, which may result in provisional financing at the beginning of next year because of the limited time left to approve any substantial changes before the year's end. Despite their relatively fast agreement, it may yet take some time to actually form the government, as the key player, President Milos Zeman, has been hospitalized since October 10th with next to no information on his condition. Fiala said that he was informed by the president's chief of staff that Zeman is ready to meet him once he is transferred from intensive care, but he did not give any further details.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. CIA Director William Burns is making a rare visit to Moscow to discuss U.S.-Russia relations, the latest in a series of high-level contacts that show both sides want to keep talking despite mutual distrust and a long list of disputes. A U.S. Embassy spokesperson said Burns was leading a delegation of senior U.S. officials to Moscow on Tuesday, yesterday, and today, Wednesday, at President Joe Biden's request. They are meeting with members of the Russian government to discuss a range of issues in the bilateral relationship, the spokesperson said. Russia's Security Council said Burns, a Russian speaker and former ambassador to Moscow, held talks with Nikolai Patrushev, the council's secretary and a former head of the Russia's FSB intelligence service. Neither side gave details of the conversation, but security issues loom large in their troubled relationship. Ties have hit a series of post-Cold War lows over issues including Russian-based cyber attacks against U.S. targets, Moscow's support of Bashar Assad of Syria, jailing of opposition politician Navalny, and Russia's behavior towards Ukraine, from which it seized the Crimea Peninsula in 2014. Biden sent a top Russia expert, Undersecretary of State Victoria Nuland, to Moscow for talks last month that failed to yield any progress in a dispute between the two countries over the sizes of their respective embassies. Biden met Putin at a summit in Geneva in June and said at the time it would take 6 months to a year to find out whether the two countries could establish a meaningful strategic dialogue. Putin frequently criticizes the U.S., but said last month he had established a constructive relationship with Biden. The Kremlin has said a further meeting between the two this year is a realistic possibility. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. And we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.